How's it hanging, people? For those who don't know me, I'm Nick, a solo game dev working on a hand-drawn Metroidvania game called Aestik. I've been documenting the development of the game for a while now, so it might be interesting for you to check out my other devlogs too. But for now, let's talk about what I've been adding since the last devlog. As I already discussed last time, I'm working on the most recent area of the game, the Halls of Nature. That's why most of the stuff I did is related to fleshing out this area. Actual content creation, like designing levels, enemies and stuff like that, is quite a grind, so it takes a lot of time to do so. Sometimes I even have to stop playing games, watching YouTube videos or overrated Netflix shows and enjoying my pitiful life to achieve something. It sounds cruel, I know. But you know, I'm committed to finishing the game someday, so that's okay. So let's actually talk about the changes I've made. I think I'll start with some of the smaller fixes. Remember this chest that doesn't actually look like a chest, but it's immersive and part of the world building, so your argument is invalid? Well, I changed some stuff about it. The player probably won't even realize the changes, but they made my life easier, and if you're working on a game yourself, you might know how important these changes can be. Before, I had to create a new script for every single chest I wanted to place in the game's world, which is honestly stupid. So I did the same thing I did for the doors and levers before, and now I only have to add a variable inside of the script where I store values to be saved and reference it in the chest script as well. I can also just type the amount of money the chest will drop. These are fixed values, so other values don't work. I added them as a tooltip though, so I don't need to remember them. Another thing I fixed in the game was the player's falling speed. I wanted to change it for a long time now, but I kinda just never bothered to do it. One of the members of the official Aestik Discord server, which you can join using the link in the description, also mentioned that the falling speed of the player gets really fast after a while, so I decided that it's the right time to fix it. It actually took me just a few minutes to pull it off. I only had to limit the player's rigid body's velocity on the y-axis when the player falls. So I set a limit, and when the velocity is higher than the value I set, it gets subtracted from the limit and the difference then gets added to the player's rigid body. That way the value stays the same without breaking anything. If that sounded complicated, let me visualize it. It's actually really simple, and I'm actually really not that smart. So let's say the velocity limit is 10, but the player falls and the velocity reaches 12. 12 then gets subtracted from the limit, which is 10, so the difference is -2. We then take the velocity, which is still 12, and add the -2 to it, which leaves us at 10 again. Remember that this function gets called every frame, so there are no deviations. It's important to put it in the fixed update method though, since we're working with physics here. Okay, that's it for the educational part of this devlog. Let's talk about sacks. I think I should explain. Since I want to bring life to the game as much as I can, I want to create NPCs too. Even though not all of them are actually important for the story progression, they make the world more believable and can add some extra lore. And a believable world can really make or break a Metroidvania in my opinion. Since most of the inhabitants of the Halls of Nature have gone insane, there aren't too many that are still sane and alive. But there are some left. Meet the sack maker, whose profession really comes in handy when there are lots of corpses to get rid of. His workshop is in a small corner of the halls where he can safely do his work. I also added 2 other NPCs. This worm follows you to the halls and even plays an essential role in the player's progression. I won't tell you what exactly happens since I don't want to spoil the whole game in these devlogs, but I still try to document everything as much as possible, so I at least mention it. Last but not least, there's the general of the halls. I might change his name in the future, but that's what he's called at the moment. I won't tell you too much about him as well, but as you might have guessed, I took the design of the spear guards and added to it to make him look more powerful and thick. So that's it for the NPCs, but there's still some interesting stuff to talk about. Let's start with a quick one. I created a new hazard for the halls. These falling crystals aren't only for hurting the player, they actually serve a purpose regarding the lore too. If you look at the environment of the area, you see that these crystals seem to have played an important role for the civilization of the kingdom. No spoilers, just some environmental storytelling. It always feels good when gameplay elements work hand in hand with the game's story, so that's a fun little addition. Also, it really wasn't hard to code as the falling movement is part of the physics system by default. I only had to limit the velocity once again. Alright, there's one thing left I didn't talk about yet. If you follow me on Twitter, which you can do using the link in the description, you might have seen that I also have been working on a new enemy type. In the last devlog I've talked about the creation of the magic guard, which was the second unique enemy type for the area. The first one was the spear guard, so I thought that it might be a little odd that all of the inhabitants in the halls are some sort of guards. That's why I decided to create the resident. This enemy only takes 4 hits to defeat and attacks by trying to roll but landing on their face. A small detail in the animation that indicates that they weren't trained for combat. Look at this pathetic noob trying to attack well. As for the last two enemies, I reused the patrol script for this one too and tweaked some values to make it more unique. I created a short script for triggering the attack when in range and changing the movement during the attack. I also recorded some unique sound effects to give the resident more of an identity. As always, the animation process itself took the most time by far. It's a fun process nonetheless, since I just do it while listening to music, podcasts or videos in the background, so I think it's time well spent. The resident is the last enemy of the Halls of Nature for now. I think that the three enemy types as well as the different platforming obstacles and traps provide enough variety and possible combinations for some interesting level designs. Speaking of level design, I finished most of the levels I had planned for the area and added some story content and unlockable shortcuts, so it's really come together. It's also arguably the hardest part of the game so far, which is completely intentional. I never wanted Aestik to be an easy game, and at this point the main mechanics should be clear enough that I have the possibility to go a little wild with the difficulty. Don't get me wrong, I'm not planning on creating an unbeatable game. I just want the player to feel accomplished after they overcome the different challenges of Aestik. If you want to try the game for yourself, feel free to join the Discord server. You can get a link to the download page of the demo there. The Halls of Nature aren't included in the demo though, just to be clear. You probably understand that I don't want to release every part of the game before the actual release. Don't judge me, but I'm planning on making at least some money with Aestik one day. Anyway, thank you for sticking around. It's been a while since the last devlog, but I believe that it's worth the wait. There's much more to talk about this way, and I do think that it's also a nice experience for you if the videos are a little bit longer. Feel free to support me on my social media channels, links are in the description. Peace out. And don't forget to leave your wife, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell.